Hi to those joining already. We're going to give it a minute for to give people time to join. So we'll give it to kind of 1 or 2 minutes past to make sure everyone has the chance to join. Hi to those joining. We're just going to give it a minute to make sure that no one ideally misses the start. So just give us a minute before we start. So we've got over 90 of us on the call now. I think we'll start. I'm sure we'll still have a few people joining, but thank you for joining us on this call, and thank you for all the support you give us and our humanitarian work. Obviously, big developments in Gaza over the last week or so with the ceasefire. Conflict going on for more than 2 years, more than 20,000 children killed, famine declared or announced by the IPC at the end of August. We know the humanitarian situation is dire, and we're primed to scale up our support now that it looks like there'll be more opportunity to reach children. We're lucky to have our Gaza humanitarian director, Rachel, joining us from Gaza to be able to tell us about what the situation is like there and our work. So we'll get straight to that. Rachel, just to add as well, there will be a chance at the end, the last 10 minutes of this call, to have a Q&A, and there's a function at the bottom that you can click on to ask questions then. So we'll get to that with around 10 minutes to go. But Rachel, thanks for joining us and for giving your time, because I know it's hugely busy working on our response. Could you just tell us what is the situation like in Gaza right now?
Thanks, Robbie, and hi everybody. Thanks for the opportunity today. Since Thursday, with the announcement of the ceasefire, there is, after the initial elation and reaction to that ceasefire, there is cautious optimism, I think. And I was just talking to some of the team in preparation for this conversation with you all today, and somebody shared that they have this very complex and mixed emotions right now. They are hopeful for the future that the ceasefire holds, but also only now, starting to process all of the emotions that they've somehow repressed for the last 2 years, because people in Gaza for the last 2 years have literally been in survival mode and existing. So the situation here for children hasn't changed significantly in this last week. So the children, we are still providing essential life-saving services. We're running clinics in Dar al-Balah and Khan Yunis. I'm in Dar al-Balah at the moment. We're running child-friendly spaces for child protection services, education, water and sanitation. Some items have arrived from the commercial supplies. Some humanitarian supplies are now entering Gaza. There's the target that we know of 600 trucks a day, plus fuel. So things are slowly becoming available in the markets. Today I drove from Dar al-Balah to Khan Yunis, and every time I do that journey 2 or 3 times a week, I am struck by the level of devastation, the complete destruction of infrastructure, and still we have literally hundreds of thousands, around 1 million people residing in makeshift shelters, makeshift settlements across Dar al-Balah and Khan Yunis. So again, what's it like in Gaza at the moment? There is this opportunity that people are holding on to for the ceasefire to hold, and this very much, I think, in its infancy, people starting to process what has happened for the last 2 years, because obviously that's been extraordinary.
Thanks, Rachel. I wonder if, I mean, I know that I've worked with you a long time. I know you've seen a lot of different humanitarian situations, but could you just give us an idea of how acute the needs of children and families are, kind of the situation they're facing and support they need?
Every single facet of a child's life has been affected by this war. And we know, as you said in your introduction, 20,000 children have been killed. That's on average of a school of, sorry, a classroom of children every day since the beginning of the war. And the acute needs, as I said, have not changed. So children are still hungry. We are still seeing a high proportion of children in our clinics diagnosed with malnutrition, with pneumonia, with diarrhea, all because, of course, of this public health crisis that we have with overcrowding, people living in extremely inadequate shelters. There is open sewage in the streets. Waste management has been completely destroyed. So children's acute needs have not changed. What we're seeing in our child-friendly spaces and in terms of the psychological, mental health, psychological support that we provide for children, and again, I was talking to my colleagues today. So the younger children seem to be, and of course, this is a very small group of children that we're talking about, seem to be reacting very positively in terms of the announcement of ceasefire. Because, of course, what we all have to remember is that the bombs since Thursday, Friday, have stopped dropping. So that, in terms of a child's safety, security, protection, has changed significantly for children. Children are now showing that they're sleeping better, that they're able to play, that they're able to start playing in a different way. But the older children in the child-friendly spaces, similar to their parents and what their parents have been sharing with us, are also now processing what's happened to them. They have lost their family members, they have lost their friends, they have missed their school and their education. But of course, schools and education give children this normality, this protection. And again, they're now processing really what the loss is over the last 2 years. But these acute needs, in terms of the life-saving services that we continue to provide, they really haven't changed. What we need, of course, is the supplies to enter into Gaza at scale. Save the Children, with our partners, have supported on safe and dignified distributions throughout this war, alongside the services that we've been able to provide throughout. And I always find it extraordinary that, despite, or maybe because of the complexity and how we've had to adapt and navigate every day, is really around firefighting in order to be able to support the teams, provide them with the protection and a degree of security to get out, to be with children in communities. The last week, we've adapted again to this different context. Now, there is less security restrictions on people's movement. Of course, we're still very much monitoring the situation hour by hour, but it is allowing us to be out more and to do more for children.
Thanks, Rachel. You've talked about some of the hard work that our teams have been doing, and we know that it's been a balance whereby you guys have been working incredibly hard over the past 2 years, but also had the access constraints that have been referred to and not been able to help children in the way that you would like. But I know we've done a lot of work. We've reached more than 1.6 million children since the start of people since the start of our response. Could you just tell us a bit more about the different types of work that we are doing, and also how we would hope to start scaling that up now that we have the opportunity to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Save the Children is one of the largest organizations working in Gaza. And of course, we've been working here for decades, since the 60s, I think. So we have very strong connections with communities, and we have a very good community acceptance of us because we are familiar, we are known. We also have a very large staff of around 200 people that work for Save the Children, to allow us to provide this whole range of services at the scale that we were able to manage within the context. So, as I said, we were running clinics in Dar al Bala and in Khan Yunis, and in those clinics, we provide a basic package of primary healthcare services with a sexual reproductive health, including a focus on adolescent girls, because of course we recognise the vulnerabilities that girls and young girls have in this type of context and in Gaza. And in addition to that, we're running 10 nutrition points. And in the nutrition points, we have specialist staff who are providing preventative measures, and also screening for children and pregnant women and breastfeeding women, and treatment, of course. And, if you look at our data through the course of the last year, you'll see obviously a very, very sharp increase in July, just before famine was declared in northern Gaza in August. We're now seeing that leveling off. And obviously, we're hoping now with the markets that will start to decrease, but our services are still very much needed and essential and life saving. So we're also running child protection services. And in our child protection, we have different components. One of them is our child friendly space, which is literally a tent or a couple of tents in communities, providing a package of services for children, adolescent girls. We've recently added adolescent boys as a cohort to work with, and also their parents. So that's a integrated package in terms of a family support. And then we have case management specialists, so social workers who work with individual cases of children, often with very, very complex needs. We have a lot of children in Gaza who've become unaccompanied or separated from their families during the war, or have lost family members. And we work with kinship care, so supporting children who are looked after within a wider family, uncles, aunts, etc. So a child protection package, which is very busy, and really we're unable to meet the demand for all of these packages that we're currently providing. And then our learning and education, and we focus on children in kindergarten and then older children up to 12 years old. And again, we have temporary learning spaces, we call them, but they're literally tents, big tents in communities where we have educators, trained teachers who are working with us, and we provide a sort of 3 sessions a day for children, English, maths, and Arabic. And again, we are unable to meet the needs. And I should say a large part of the work that we do is working with our Palestinian partners in Gaza, who are also working with us in education services, child protection. And very recently, actually, we've working with a partner in nutrition. So again, trying to expand our work, always very mindful of the quality of the work that we're doing. Given the context that we're working in, we never compromise on quality. We sometimes have to compromise on equipment or supplies that we're working in, but we never compromise on the quality of the services that we're providing children. And then really a very large part of the work that we're doing is twofold. One is providing multi-purpose cash assistance to families. And we know that throughout the war, extraordinarily, cash and e-vouchers or e-transfers that we've been able to provide, despite the restrictions on the market, people have always, in our post-distribution monitoring, reacted very positively. This is a very feasible and appropriate intervention that we've been able to support with throughout. And then the other is really the water and sanitation and hygiene work that we've been providing for many, many thousands and thousands of people. We provide drinking water, water trucking to communities every day. Thousands of litres of water goes out across the whole of Gaza. Recently, also in Gaza city, before the evacuation of the population, we were able to support provision of water up until very, very recently, actually. And then provision of community latrines, cleaning services, and hygiene promotion. And when we've been able to provide hygiene kits to go alongside the hygiene and the other work that we do in water and sanitation. I think I've covered everything. It's a very large integrated program of work that we're providing for children and their families in Gaza.
You've certainly covered everything that I know about, Rachel, and it's incredibly impressive that you guys have been able to achieve so much in
No,
that
it's
environment.
honestly, it's extraordinary. And, as I said, we have a very large team, over 200 people that work with us, including doctors, nurses, midwives in the clinics, community volunteers, community engagement workers. And sometimes through the war, I've been here for quite a long time, and I think, my goodness me, how are we able to do this? But it's because of the The dedication of our team. They're driven by the shared purpose that we have, which is to alleviate the suffering of children, and we've been able to do that.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm actually going to, because you've done such a good job of taking us across all the different aspects of our response, and I'm sure people have questions and want to give people the opportunity to do that. So, guys, I think I can see now actually there have been some questions coming in already. So, thank you for that, and we'll get on to some of those. So, one of those questions is, does money from the Children's Emergency Fund help Gaza? To which I can help answer, but I'll throw that to you first, Rachel.
The Children's Emergency Fund for Save the Children is extraordinary because it's the most flexible funding that we receive, and it's rapid dispersal as well through Save the Children. So we've been very fortunate in Gaza, and actually in the country office as well, in the occupied Palestinian territories country office, to receive quite a lot of funding from the Children's Emergency Fund. And of course, this allows us to make decisions very, very quickly. So when there is a new displacement of a population group, so recently when the mass evacuation from Gaza City was underway in full force and there was hundreds of thousands of people on the move, we were able to very quickly disperse, using a rapid response mechanism, funds for multi-purpose cash. And we were only able to do that because of the money that we have from the Children's Emergency Fund. We've done other work, water trucking, for example, again, very quick decision making, and very immediate, alleviating the suffering of children, which of course is the whole thread and purpose of our Children's Emergency Fund. So we've been, as I said, we've received quite a lot of funding from that, and it's allowed us to be very reactive and very responsive in terms of the needs of children. Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. I believe it's more than 30 million since over the 2 years that has gone.
Yeah.
So it's the most
Extraordinary amount
from the Children's Emergency Fund since it began. We've got another question here about how we're able to get, because you mentioned water and water trucking, how we're able to get that in. And I think there have been some reports over there being difficulties and kind of facing attacks with things like that, which might prevent that. So are there difficulties you have to negotiate when getting water into communities?
Well, water is, there are very, very large, before the war, there was a very, very large, quite complex network of desalination plants in Gaza, the fuel for which has obviously been very, very challenging throughout the war. And some of those very, very large desalination plants have been damaged throughout the war. Working with UNICEF, one of our main UN partners, we've been able to receive water, drinking water and potable water inside Gaza with large tankers to be able to move them across Gaza. Not always in the volume that we would like, and extraordinarily now, the latest data from UNICEF and the WASH cluster is that across Gaza, people are surviving off 6 liters of water per day, where not even the gold standard, the minimum standard rather, in a humanitarian crisis is 15 liters per day. So people are having to ration water. We are pushing it out as fast as it can be produced, but we are hopeful. Now that the bombing has stopped, as I said, there will be some infrastructure repairs happening, which will be able to increase the amount of water and drinking water that's pushed out to communities. Gaza City at the moment is deeply, deeply concerning. There definitely isn't enough water availability, and that's really very much down to the infrastructure that's been destroyed in the war.
Thanks, Rachel. I think you've answered this to some extent in terms of referencing it being safer and the bombs not dropping, but someone has asked, Barbara has asked, how quickly will you be able to scale up now that more aid will be allowed in and the situation is safer?
It's a great question. Save the Children, over the last weekend, we developed a scale-up plan to the ceasefire, which is ambitious, of course, but we are Save the Children. We're a very ambitious organisation. And basically, what we've been doing for the last 2 years is extremely appropriate and relevant, and it's life-saving services for children. So the plan, if we're able to, with supplies coming in, of course, additional funding required, is to do more of what we've been doing for the last 2 years, and the context change that's happened since Friday with the bombs dropping and the ability to move around Gaza has created this environment where we will be able to deliver on our ambitious plan. But we're also looking, obviously, it's not only about saving children, there's many other humanitarian actors within Gaza. And of course, we work very closely with our 11 partners that we have in Gaza, Palestinian colleagues in Gaza, who are working, again, tirelessly, having also, as my team have as well, experienced huge loss, huge numbers of displacements. But again, this shared purpose within the humanitarian community to alleviate the suffering. We are ready to scale up, given supplies hopefully now entering at a larger scale and funding that will become available.
Thanks, Rachel. That leads us onto the next question that's been asked, which is how are you and how are the team doing? And are you all able to get kind of enough food and to kind of look after yourself to a certain extent?
So, I mean, thank you. Thanks for the question. It's interesting. Again, just as I was coming to this time with you all, I was talking to the team, as I said, about how are they, because I see across the team, again, large team, 200 people, some people react in different ways, and we all know that from different parts of our lives, right? But generally, people are exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And I think it's this sort of slowly, this survival instinct that has been there for the last 2 years. Now that's sort of, the foot has been taken off the gas a little bit, and people are starting to process. And we've had a lot of emotions in the office, a lot of tears, and a lot of people feeling quite nervous and anxious about the future, because of course we all know that it's still a very precarious time. It's still very early in the process, but as I said, the markets have been responding, so people are able to find food to be able to feed their families. There was a time at the peak in July, at the end of July, when we were having to source food for our team in terms of feeding them in the office, because people were fainting in the sites. It was extremely hot and people just weren't able to find food to eat. We've passed that stage, thank goodness. And now that people are having food, there is water, hopefully improving all the time. But the team, I think, obviously, as I said, cautiously optimistic, exhausted, and processing a lot of emotions between them.
Thanks for answering that, Rachel. And the next question has started with thank you so much for sharing these insights. Have the staff been able to leave Gaza and come back during the last 2 years, or has the team been more or less stable?
So we have a international team which was larger. It went through phases during the scale up of the response. We are now 3 international staff in Gaza. So when I'm talking about my team, I'm very much talking about our Palestinian colleagues and my Palestinian team. And since May last year, when the Rafah offensive occurred and the Rafah crossing was closed, none of my team have left Gaza. So there is talk. People are talking, obviously, about taking leave, taking a break once that crossing opens. Still a lot of uncertainty about that crossing. But no, people have been living this, experiencing this every single day for just over 2 years.
Thanks, Rachel. Someone has asked, are you able to do standard procurements inside Gaza at the moment?
Well, recently, the market in Gaza is extraordinary. So it's very reactionary, obviously, to when supplies are able to come in. I'm not a supply chain expert, but it always has amazed me what we've been able to buy locally in the market. Often not at the volume that we'd like, and not very specialist items, and certainly not medical equipment or supplies. Obviously, we're not able to buy anything like that in the market. But for example, this week, we're doing a distribution of 1,000 child protection mental health kits for children, 1,000 kits. So that's a school bag with some items in the bags for each child. And we were able to buy that in the local market. And now that commercial suppliers have started to enter in at greater volume, we're very much looking at a two-pronged approach to any supplies that we're needing to buy. One of the big demands, one of the biggest needs as we move into winter is shelter kits. So tents, tarpaulin, bedding, mattresses, blankets. Previously, we bought that through Egypt and brought them in across the border. We're looking at both options. Egypt, we have suppliers ready, lined up to go, but we're also looking at the option of buying items inside Gaza. Again, it's tricky with the scale that we'd like to buy things at, but we will also be looking at the market inside Gaza. Yeah, so it's a two-track approach.
Thanks, Rachel. The next question someone's asked, good question. As you know, there are many children with disabilities in Gaza. What plans are in place to ensure that their inclusion in emergency needs assessments and humanitarian responses? And additionally, how can we ensure accountability and tailored support for this vulnerable group within protection programming? That's
Great question. Thank you. So we have a very much an integrated mindset in terms of disability and inclusion in all of the work, not only in our child protection work, but also in our education work. We also, when we're obviously providing nutrition services, quite a large proportion of children that we've seen through our nutrition have disabilities, physical and mental health disabilities. And, with nutrition and malnutrition, often children with disabilities are the most vulnerable in terms of disease and malnutrition, so they are extremely vulnerable. So we very much have a focus on that in all that we do in terms of the design of our programming, and also, as you said, as the assessments, and we're hoping to now start to conduct much more assessments given the opportunity and the access. We also work with a couple of partners who have specialist disability expertise, which we're able to bring in to our programming or refer children to their programming to ensure that they're receiving the most appropriate and relevant approaches to meet their needs.
Thanks, Rachel. I've got to say, we've had more questions than I've ever had on one of these chats before. So I'm afraid we're coming towards the end of time. We're not going to have the chance to plough through all of them. But one other one to ask you from Michelle is, I don't think we've referenced numbers yet. How many Save the Children staff employees do we have in Gaza? And I guess you could also reference how many partners we have too, and how are we supporting them to continue this incredible work?
Oh, good question. So we have, I say, around 200 staff. I walked into a room today and there were 6 brand new starters. So I'm going to stick with around 200 staff. Some of those are our community engagement workers, over 100 are community engagement workers who are literally our front line in the communities every day, providing the services. As I said, we have doctors, nurses running the clinic. So the whole cohort is around 200. We work with 11 partners in Gaza who are providing child protection and these specialist services for children with disabilities. And we also, I think that was the answer to the question. So yeah, 11 partners, but we're also looking at expanding, always looking to work with new partners. We have an amazing partnership manager, Russia, who works tirelessly to find and identify new partners that we can then talk to see how we can complement each other in the works that we do.
Thanks, Rachel. And some of you guys who dialed into one of our previous Gaza webinars might recall hearing directly from Rasha. She spoke very well on that last time. I'm going to ask one last question before we wrap up, which is just, what do you need? What do children need in this situation right now? Obviously things have changed. We're ready to scale up. What do you guys need?
Great. So, well, first and foremost, we need this ceasefire to last. We need this to become a definitive ceasefire. We need the bombs to stay away. They've stopped dropping now, which allows children to start to hope and allows us, to say, the children to be part of their hope and also part of the rebuilding of Gaza, we need the humanitarian supplies to enter at scale consistently. We need to be allowed to do our jobs to provide safe and dignified distributions for children. And of course, as Save the Children and with our partners, to allow us to do that with agility, with speed, and to react to the very, very rapid changing context, we need flexible funding to allow us to do that at scale.
Thanks, Rachel. So it is time, that's flown by, and time to bring this to a close. So thank you very much for joining us and giving us all of this insight, Rachel. And then just to everybody on the call, thank you very much for joining, and thank you for all of your support for a long time and from the beginning of this over the last 2 years. We've been desperately hoping a time would come where we were able to scale up and where we were able to do more for children. And now is that time, and your support is integral to that and very much appreciated. So thank you very much for everyone to joining. You'll be hearing from your contacts, our members, with follow-up and with recording and things like that. But yeah, thank you to Rachel, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you so much.